Hello, I'm Pastor Chris Buresh from Good Shepherd Lutheran Church right here in Palos Heights. As a pastor and member of the community, I get to find out about all types of amazing things that are happening in the Palos community. And as we look to support these good things that are going on, to help others and help many, one of the things we hear back continually is that we wish more people knew that we existed. We wish we could help more people. And so it is that we gather this month for our service of the Community Bridge to highlight one of those agencies that is making a profound impact in the greater Palos community, the Second Story Foundation. It's my honor to welcome Jim O'Connor to the dust today. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Good.
I appreciate it.
Well, share a little bit about yourself and what the Second Story Foundation is all about.
So I'm the executive director and one of the founders of the Second Story Foundation. We're a 501c3 nonprofit public charity, and we were founded in Palos Park. In 2022, I was the director of the Pathway to Sobriety program at the Center of Palos Park. The center has a lot of different programs there, but one of those programs is called the Pathway to Sobriety program, and it's a men's long-term residential recovery program, and it's a pretty special place. We took men who were suffering from severe substance use disorder, alcoholism and addiction, and after a 28-day inpatient treatment, men who were accepted would come to the center and they would live and work there until they were ready to go get a job and then eventually hopefully move out into independent living. And that process took 9 months to 2 years in some cases. And by 2022, we had become pretty successful. We were getting a lot of guys to the program, really healthy with good jobs. But getting their names on leases was really getting difficult. People who have suffered from chronic relapse and substance use disorder often experience so many losses, and much of that loss is financial. And to get into the independent rental market, you'd have to have a credit score of 650 or higher. And a lot of our guys had sub 600 credit scores. And I'd say 10 years ago, it was easier to find a human landlord who we could approach and say, hey, we've got a guy or two here, they've got a good job, we can show you pay stubs, and somebody would take a chance on them to rent them an apartment or maybe put 3 people in a house. Now the process is run by property management companies that are largely computerized. And so it was extremely difficult to get guys who were able to afford, fair market or near fair market rent into healthy, stable homes and stable communities near where they started their recovery journey. So I was approached by a few men from Christ Community Church out in Lamont, and to make a long story short, we decided to start our own nonprofit with the intention of securing stable housing for men who were a year sober at least, had good jobs, and were showing themselves to be really good bets, responsible citizens, growing into themselves in recovery. And so our first project, we were founded in 2022, our first project began in January of 2023. We bought a house that was in foreclosure in Alsip, and we worked with the village of Alsip, who was wonderful. We had a lot of volunteer labor, and we remodeled the house. And in the end of June of 2023, we put 4 men who had completed the Pathway program into that house with year-long leases. These houses aren't halfway houses or recovery houses. These are independent leases that these men sign. And right now, they're all still sober. They're still working at their jobs. And they all intend to sign for another year. And so that was our first house. A few weeks ago, with the help of the Women from Home to Home, a great nonprofit that's out in, is it Justice? I'd have to look it up. They helped us decorate a home in Orland Hills that we secured, and we put 3 more men in that home. So just in the last year and a few months, we've had 7 men go from homelessness to 28-day inpatient to a long-term recovery, and now living independently in their own place. And so that was our initial intention.
Wow, that's quite a great story. Now, I know there's a lot of stigma around individuals that are dealing with addiction or alcoholism. What are some of those that you hear, and what are some of the things that you've seen that maybe speak to them?
So I think, there's a lot of opinions around substance use disorder. There's a lot of feelings too. Substance use disorder is, a disease, and it's a clinical disease. It's recognized in the DSM-5, but because of, some of the consequences that arise, broken family ties, lost jobs, often, people in severe substance use addiction turn to crime to support their addiction. So because of this, I think, I would say that the number one stigma is that to suffer from severe substance use disorder is a moral failing. And it's my experience that that's not the case. I had a great professor who described it this way once. I thought this was wonderful. You know that this is a disease because people suffer what for normal people would be catastrophic consequences, and it still doesn't change their behavior. And, the losses that people suffer, that can begin with relationships, family ties, jobs, housing, licenses, picking up a criminal record. These are devastating. And the stigma that I would love to help eradicate is that this is a moral failing of the person. It's my experience that an individual does not want to live this way. That the chemical processes and the behavioral processes that drive people further into addiction make getting out of it alone almost impossible. So people need help. And then the other thing I would stress to anybody is that recovery is possible. That it is possible for people with the right amount of attention, the right amount of care, and some structure, from people who know how to deliver programs, full recovery from severe alcoholism and addiction is really possible. And to watch that happen is super joyful.
Oh, it's fantastic to hear you talk about it and highlight. You mentioned one thing that I think is also helpful, and I'd love to hear you speak more about it. You mentioned that oftentimes it's thought of as kind of an individual type deal and a moral failure of the individual, but it oftentimes impacts so many others in regards to relationships and such. What are some of the things that you've seen or some of the challenges that substance abuse presents to a greater community than just the individual that's maybe captured by that disorder?
Right. So I think the easiest thing that is to watch. It's hard to watch people fail. I think that's difficult for people to understand that there's, and it's been true in my life, in my family, and I've been through so many, that people think that there's just an ethic where you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, try harder, and you can do this. I think that isn't possible, without structure, without some serious help. People lean into DUIs, theft, domestic disturbances, and these affect other people. And I'll be honest that if someone has cancer, you don't often see them shoplifting due to cancer, right? And so nobody says, hey, this person has a disease, we have empathy for them, we'll get them help. There's a plan if you have cancer. There's a structure for that too in addiction, but when people don't accept help and they're driven further and further into their losses, they do affect communities, families, and I think that without knowledge and without empathy, people tend to blame the alcoholic and the addict.
Interesting. Yeah, I like how you say that. Without empathy and without understanding, they blame the alcoholic, even though it seems like there's a part that we all have to play in this. Speaking about that, so what are some of the programs or options for anybody that might be themselves struggling with substance abuse or have a loved one that they know is struggling with substance abuse? What are some of the things out there that you would recommend they inquire of, pursue, or search for?
Okay, so that's a great question, and I'm happy to answer it. I think the very first thing is to understand that someone who is, in the throes of severe substance use disorder, that person is suffering. There is a suffering, and they may be combative, they may be defensive, but this person is suffering. They're living a life of suffering, they're living a life of loss, they're doing things to their families, friends, loved ones, to their value system, and to their bodies that are just not life-affirming, right? And so this is what suffering is. And so the first thing I would say is to family members is to embrace suffering with love. To just embrace that suffering with love, to acknowledge that this person is suffering, acknowledge your own suffering, and then ask for help. And there is a continuum of care that exists, and that first one is a phone call. Often it could be to a hospital. A 28-day inpatient rehab is a great place to start. It's not really a solution to a long-term problem and to a deep-seated problem that affects health, relationships, employment, housing, criminal activity, and a spiritual condition. But it is a way to get a break, a breather from being in active addiction. So a 28-day inpatient program is a great place to start. There's intensive outpatient programs, and that may be where somebody needs to start if they're not ready to commit to that inpatient. But the first thing you do is ask for professional help. And there is a continuum of care that exists that if you continue to ask for help, it is there. It's not always exactly what everybody wants to do in the moment, but 28-day programs, recovery homes, halfway houses, and 12-step recovery support groups are out there. One of the great things about Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, is there is a meeting every single night of the week, every week of the year. And there are people in those rooms that are willing to embrace that person who's suffering with love and a program of direction. So that's, the first thing I would say is embrace the suffering with love and then ask for help.
Neat. What would you say sets the Second Story Foundation apart from some of the other ones like 12 Steps programs, Alcoholics Anonymous, Al-Anon, Pathway to Sobriety programs, some other places that you've brought up in the course of your conversation today, as well as the need that you noticed was kind of a gap from what you had studied?
Right. So I should start by saying we have, so right now the Second Story is operating 3 programs. We've got the Second Story Alsop House, Second Story Orland Hills, and we just began a no-interest microloan program to help people who are in recovery, who are working, who might need a small loan to get a car so they can get a job or to get to a better job. So we've loaned out, money for a car. When that loan is paid back, we'll reloan the money. So those are 3 active programs. We are developing the Second Story Ranch program, and this is a program we're looking at to develop a 68-acre horse farm out in Crete, Illinois. And we are going to build a long-term residential recovery program for men, and it's going to focus on men who suffer from chronic relapse from substance use disorder, chronic unemployment, and housing instability. And one of the things that I think that the Second Story Foundation is trying to do is, number one, look at where there are systemic barriers for people to get over a hump, let's say, in recovery, to get that where people often fail. And so for many people to come out of a 28-day inpatient program, they went in, that's great, and a healthy aftercare plan would tell someone while they were in the 28-day program, look, you got to get a stable job. You got to get a safe, sober place to live. we'd love you to be part of a 12-step program, 12-step support program, and to be part of a community, have some purpose and meaning in your life. And for somebody who is, in the throes of addiction, who's experienced chronic relapse problems, chronic unemployment, that is a heavy lift. And so what we started to look at is where are the breakdowns: jobs, housing, and stability. And so our Second Story Ranch program will exist to give people jobs on the farm in horse care, farming and maintenance, and we'll give them unlimited amount of time. They won't take an unlimited amount of time. My experience tells me that a year, maybe between a year and 2 years, is kind of the sweet spot for someone to be in a program like ours where they can really turn their life around. But when they come out of a 28-day program, they will have a job, a meaningful job, and they will be able to work at that job and live on our farm while they begin a recovery routine and start to build a community and a network. And so they will have a job, they'll have stable housing, and the Second Story Foundation, I think, is basically community-based solutions to what feel like intractable problems. We're not a giant agency. We're not state-funded. We're privately funded, and we're looking at where are the fail-safe points in a person's recovery where we can help give them the gift that they need in order to keep moving forward. And, right now, there are no freestanding, single-standing programs that I know of that will give unlimited amount of time, jobs, housing, and that community support that someone needs for free. And so that's our intention with our Second Story Ranch program, our Second Story housing, and our Second Story transportation programs are basically just gifts. They're gifts that someone needs, and we believe that when someone's earnestly working in recovery and they get these very meaningful gifts to get them over systemic barriers, they end up living up to the measure of the gift.
Beautiful. I want to make sure I heard everything correctly, because it sounds like where you feel Second Story is unique is that rather than just helping somebody in the midst of moving through a recovery, you really accompany them in developing a healthy routine, a community, and a network so that they're equipped to kind of continue on in their own recovery, but doing so in a way where they're acclimated to the wider community and can contribute and participate in the wider community.
Right. And so it's a lot to ask someone who maybe has had been unemployed for months, if not years, or had many jobs over, say, a year or 2 years before they enter recovery, to say, go get a job, right? So, or go get stable housing. So our answer is to say, hey, we've got you there. We've got that. You're still gonna work. You're gonna do this work. We're gonna help you. We're gonna do it with you, shoulder to shoulder. And hey, that community, we'll do that. We'll bring that in. So we work with multiple churches, and we're building we're starting to build a really wonderful network in Will County. The Second Story Foundation is now part of the Will Grundy County Recovery-Oriented Systems of Care. We're working with the Will County Substance Use Initiatives. Dr. Kathleen Burke and Connie DeWall are wonderful over there. I have just joined the board of directors of the Recovery Community Center of Joliet, and we've joined the Illinois Association of Behavioral Health. So we are developing a network where we can bring the community, bring people who have experience and are healthy, either in faith-based communities, fellowship-building communities, and larger recovery treatment communities, and bring them to our space. So it's a large, safe space out in the open. Working outdoors is great. Working with horses is wonderful. But we're able to say with this program, we've got those things that you need. Come here. Let's work together. We'll give you time. And in the time that they're allotted, men will start growing into themselves where they can then be useful members of society, good citizens, and models and peer support for the people that are coming in newly to the program.
One of the things that you bring, that you highlight here is, in the conversation, has been relapse, because that's something that's common. What is, in regards to those that the Second Story Foundation has served, what has been any statistics in regards to individuals who've continued on in the program or successfully went through and have continued either with one of the houses or went on and got their own house?
I mean, knock on wood, this is a tough business, and it's a tough question in the substance use disorder treatment space. What's success? We have had no instances of relapse so far. And, you know, the longer we are operating, the more people will help. You know, that's not likely to be sustainable. You know, it is, it's a difficult process to change your life fully. Not everybody makes it, and for some people it takes multiple tries. Our experience, though, is that when you're giving someone this really, you know, a great breadth of time, a great deal of direction, and those fundamental needs, we would talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is you need safety, stability, you know, food, protection, housing, right? And then as you work up that pyramid, you're looking towards self-actualization. That's where we get to relationship building, love, meaning. And when we give people those, when we set people up in a space, you know, where they can work through all those things safely, the relapse rates are far, far, far lower.
Yeah. I'll say I brought up the question because you and I had talked before, and I was just blown away knowing that there are other programs out there. However, the relapse rates for individuals with substance abuse can be quite high. And as you've shared, having a little bit of time now that there's been absolutely no relapse is quite phenomenal when it comes to the substance abuse care and treatment.
Yeah, there's difficult messaging, right? We talk, the AA mantra, and it's really true, is one day at a time. And that's all anybody can do in any given space. It's just a mindful truth that one day at a time is all we can do. Now, the larger truth is, if you take the 30,000-foot view, 6 months really isn't very long. 9 months isn't really very long. I don't know the actual statistics, but I know that, you know, for every year someone is able to maintain their sobriety, their odds for another year go up a great degree. You know, so if you can get to 1 year in a healthy way and have a community, your odds to get to 2 are high, and if you get to 2, to get to 3 are even higher, and so on. So time is another thing that we look at. You know, taking time limits off our programming says to an individual and to the community is, we don't know how long it's going to take you to fully heal, but we're going to be with you the whole way. There's not a date that you're going to have to get out of here by. We're with you for the long run. That's
beautiful. Now, being with people for the long run, obviously, it takes resources. How is it that the Second Story Foundation is resourced? Where is your funding? How is it that you're supported?
So to date, we are 100% supported by private donations, and that's, you know, individual contributions, you know, from $100 to $10,000, and we write grants for family foundations, corporate foundations, and, you know, we're very grateful and proud of the people that we brought along to help support us so far. Our Second Story Ranch program is, you know, orders of magnitude larger. And so the funding for our ranch program, we've got a few buckets that we're looking at right now. We need to purchase the farm, and we've got a deal to do that, a verbal agreement, and we're working on going under contract soon. And then we have to build a 7,000 square foot lodge, which will be a residence for the men, and 2,000 square feet of that space is going to be a community center that we will have open for fellowship activities, 12-step groups, continuing education credits in the mental health and addictions fields, and just, a fun space to have people over, right? And so there'll be a 7,000 square foot lodge and then 2 single family residences on site. So that's a major project. We have been working with our state representative and senator, U.S. senator, and we've gotten great feedback from their offices about funding through congressionally directed spending. We are working with the Will County 708 Mental Health Board, and we are members of the Illinois Association of Behavioral Health, and we believe that we are an excellent, excellent funding opportunity for the Illinois opioid settlement. We will be one of the only places that I know that will give long-term residential recovery support to people who are on medically assisted treatment. And so those are 4 boxes where we can get, if we can pull together those resources, we'll have our build. We intend to be privately funded year over year. So we're working with an excellent grant writing team, and we are looking at large foundations to sustain us over time. But we're very hopeful about the support and feedback we've gotten at the municipal level and at the federal level from our representatives.
Well, that's great. I mean, the fact that they've given you feedback obviously means you're onto something. It sounds like this is a unique program too. I don't think I've heard anything about it from any other sources or anybody else doing anything similar.
I think that's what makes us special, and I hope that that's what that's what puts us over the line for the large funding opportunities, is that our program is a really unique answer to really tough problems. And we believe that our outcomes are going to be outsized for the spending. If we go back a little bit to what we were talking about, we've looked into it, and I've worked with people who suffer from severe substance use disorder and what we would call chronic relapse. And so if you take someone who's struggling, a common process, and I'm thinking of a person we studied, one individual, in the course of the year, was on Medicaid and had 9 ambulance rides, 9 emergency room visits, 3 28-day inpatient treatments, and 3 court cases in the course of a year. And that costs a lot of money. And so I think the breakdown is for every dollar spent in recovery services, you save $4 to $5 in societal costs.
Yeah.
And for our program, I think the impact will be greater because we'll be working with people who have co-occurring mental health disorders. We'll be working with people who have experienced homelessness and chronically unemployed. So the service population that we're going to help is going to even have a larger societal impact for that dollar spent. And I think because of the way we're structured and because of the experience that we bring, I think that we're a really great funding opportunity for people who care about this space.
It's fantastic. I mean, a great asset not only to assist the individuals and those directly impacted, their family and friends, but also the greater community. So sounds admirable, sounds exciting, sounds fun.
It is exciting.
So if somebody wants to talk to you and find out more about the Second Story Foundation, or ways in which they might be able to get involved, or just discover what it is that they might be able to do to assist you, to assist the foundation, or maybe even find resources to address specific issues they might have in themselves or for their family, how is it that people can contact you? What would you direct people to do?
So we'll start, and I'll just get this off the books. You can go to our website, it's second2ndstoryfoundation.org. And we've got a great breakdown of our programs. You can also donate online. We need, no amount is too small. While I described these large funding opportunities for a capital project, We still need help with operational funding to get to that point and through that point. So you can donate on our website. And if anyone is looking for help, we can, our email address is secondstoryfoundation@gmail.com. I think we're going to put those up on a banner. And I am committed to helping, outside of this space. If anybody, there's a line in an AA pledge that says, when anyone anywhere reaches out, I want the hand of AA always to be there. And that's how I feel about helping anybody in recovery. So even if people are just curious how they can get involved as volunteers, or if they're looking help for themselves or loved ones, if they reach out through email, I will get back to them.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Jim. I mean, this has been a wealth of information. Thank you for providing this information for the community. Thank you for providing the service for the community. Just another example of some things that are going on in Palos Heights you might not be aware of, but could certainly make an impact in your life or the lives of somebody that you care about. Thank you, Jim, for being here. Thank you for the Second Story Foundation. And until next time, God bless.